The night's highway is an altar of anonymity, miles of blacktop unfurling beneath tires, the world outside reduced to a tunnel of light and shadow. It is here, in the hush between towns, that you first notice the subtle, gnawing tension. The temperature inside your car dips as the dashboard clock blinks later and later. Headlights sweep past like pale ghosts, and the world narrows until it's just you, the road, and whatever waits beyond the reach of your beams. The hum of the engine becomes your lullaby. But it is a fragile comfort, easily shattered by the smallest, most ordinary anomaly. A flicker in the mirrors, a shape at the shoulder, the sudden vacuum of silence when the radio turns to static. There on that endless stretch where civilization is a memory and time runs thin, the illusion of safety is paper thin. Each journey begins with purpose and routine, the familiar rituals of travel, the hurried packing, the quick calculation of miles, the trust in maps and phone screens. But as the hours stretch and the sky bruises with night, these rituals become talismans against the unknown. The rearview mirror, once a tool for casual glances, transforms into an oracle, its dark glass holding secrets you dare not name. You watch the procession of headlights approach and recede, each one a brief reassurance that you are not alone. But then inevitably, there comes a moment when the last light fades, swallowed by a curve or a hill or a trick of the darkness, and you are left with nothing but the hollow ache of your own breath and the vast, indifferent night pressing against the glass. It is in these stretches, where the familiar blurs into the uncanny, that something ancient and formless stirs, drawing close to the warmth of your engine, the pulse of your fear. The highway is a living thing, its true face revealed only when the world forgets you. No matter how tightly you grip the wheel, no matter how many times you check the locks, you cannot drive fast enough to outrun the chill that creeps from the corners of your mind. The landscape itself becomes complicit, gas stations standing in pools of flickering neon, rest stops abandoned to the weeds, the woods crowding closer with every mile. There is an unspoken pact among travelers. Keep moving, don't stop, pretend you don't see what the darkness tries to show you. Perhaps you have felt it too, that peculiar dread when the road behind you grows empty and the world ahead promises only more isolation. The kind that prickles at your skin when you glimpse a shape too tall for a deer, or catch a face in the window that you know, with every nerve in your body, should not be there. You tell yourself stories to explain it away. The tricks of exhaustion, the play of headlights, the mind's talent for self-sabotage. But deep down, you know the truth. The highway is a threshold, and some nights, something crosses over. Tonight, the stories begin where comfort fails. A couple, laughter fading, stranded at a forgotten rest stop as footsteps circle their car and the weight of unseen eyes settles on their shoulders. Friends, once emboldened by company, lost in a labyrinth of fog and forest where the boundary between memory and menace dissolves. A solitary driver navigating the mountain's winding spine, the radio's static whispering secrets best left unheard, each mile echoing with the phantom tread of those who vanished before. These are not tales meant to be solved or explained, only endured like the darkness itself. You are invited not merely to listen, but to inhabit the silence between the heartbeats, the tension in the air when headlights vanish from your mirror, and your only companion is the darkness pressing close. The road is long, the night indifferent, and whatever follows may not remain behind. The rituals of safety, the locked doors, the mapped routes, the steady hum of the engine, are fragile offerings on an altar built for something older, something that waits just beyond the reach of your lights. The journey ahead will demand more than caution. It will ask what you are willing to abandon in order to survive the unseen. And when the sky bleeds from dusk to midnight, you may find that what haunts these highways is not a rumor or a shadow, but something far more real and far closer than you ever imagined. Beyond the reach of headlights, dread is not a sudden visitor, but a slow, patient seep, an insidious infiltration of the senses that reshapes the ordinary into the deeply unsettling. As hours claw forward, the smallest anomalies become magnified. A distant scrape beneath the chassis, the erratic pulse of the dashboard clock, the peculiar way moonlight fractures across the windshield. Each detail, trivial in daylight, acquires a secret weight. The mind, starved for patterns, begins to construct meaning from fragments. a patch of fog swirling too deliberately, a flicker in the rear view that vanishes when scrutinized, a static-laced voice whispering through the speakers in a cadence that almost mimics human speech. Here the highway ceases to be a route and becomes a crucible, testing the integrity of perception and the resilience of sanity. Now, imagine the subtle transformation as companionship, once a bulwark against fear, becomes a vector for paranoia. Within the car's cramped interior, glances are exchanged with growing unease, each passenger privately cataloging the oddities that the others seem not to notice. Silence thickens, punctuated only by the nervous shuffle of feet or the sharp intake of breath when the vehicle rounds a blind curve and the trees appear to lean closer, conspiring. It is in these moments that trust begins to erode, not only in the world outside but in the people beside you, and most unsettlingly in your own senses. A friend's muttered reassurance sounds rehearsed, hollow. A partner's grip on your arm feels urgent, desperate, as if they too sense an encroaching presence but refuse to name it. This crisis of faith, subtle, unspoken, fractures the thin veneer of solidarity that had seemed unbreakable at the journey's outset. Further complicating matters, the world beyond the glass begins to exert a quiet, magnetic pull. Shapes in the periphery tantalize with the promise of explanation, yet dissolve upon closer inspection. The radio, once a lifeline to civilization, sputters and dies, leaving only the irregular percussion of gravel against the undercarriage and the erratic chorus of unseen nocturnal creatures. You begin to notice patterns in these sounds, a rhythm that repeats syncopated with your own heartbeat, as if the landscape itself is learning your cadence. The illusion of control slips further away, replaced by a gnawing sense that you are being observed, catalogued, and perhaps even shepherded toward some predestined encounter. Another crucial dimension emerges when the environment itself conspires to disorient. Road signs buckle under the weight of graffiti and moss, their meaning obscured. Familiar landmarks warp in the shadows, refusing to anchor you in time or place. The GPS offers contradictory instructions, its cold voice losing confidence with every recalculation, until it lapses into a loop of dead-end suggestions. At this juncture, the very tools designed to ensure safe passage become instruments of confusion, amplifying the growing suspicion that the route you travel is not entirely of your own choosing. It is here, in the liminal space between control and chaos, that the unknown asserts its sovereignty. Finally, the body registers what the mind continues to deny. Fatigue drags at your limbs, but sleep is impossible. The thought of closing your eyes, even for a moment, is intolerable. Your skin tingles with the certainty that something is drawing closer, just out of sight. An instinct compels you to scan the darkness again and again. In this crucible, faith, in logic, in loved ones, in yourself, becomes a tenuous thread, stretched to its breaking point by the relentless pressure of the unknown. Each mile strips away another layer of certainty, leaving only raw, unmediated fear and the desperate hope that dawn, when it arrives, will bring absolution rather than revelation. At this stage, the landscape's hostility becomes almost architectural in its precision, each element arranged to erode the boundaries of self-assurance and reality. The darkness is no longer a passive void, but seems to pulse and breathe, forming new corridors and blind spots with every swerve of the car. The world outside acquires a warped geometry. What was once a straightforward highway now twists into a labyrinth, each turn unfamiliar, each straightaway stretching into infinity. The horizon itself appears to retreat, refusing to grant the comfort of arrival or the promise of escape. Within this mutable environment, the mind's compass begins to falter, and every attempt to orient oneself, by memory, by map, by instinct, yields only greater confusion. Even the air thickens, carrying with it the metallic tang of ozone and the faint sour scent of decay, as if the earth itself is exhaling secrets best left buried. Now consider how easily certainty slips away when the world's rules bend in subtle, insidious ways. Perhaps a familiar road sign now bears an unfamiliar name, or the mileage to the next town fails to change after miles of travel. The headlights pick out details that refuse to cohere. A mailbox standing in the center of the road, A patch of wildflowers blooming in the dead of night. A child's bicycle tangled in the branches of a tree. These are not merely visual anomalies. They are provocations, designed to unsettle and to challenge the very idea of what is possible. The effect is cumulative. Each aberration chips away at the conviction that reality is fixed and knowable, until even the most rational mind begins to entertain the possibility that the world has shifted on some imperceptible axis. Building further, the physicality of fear becomes undeniable. Muscles tense, jaws clench, and hands cramp on the steering wheel until knuckles pale. The body interprets the environment's cues with primitive urgency, heart pounding, breath shallow, skin prickling as though charged by an unseen current. These reactions are not mere byproducts of anxiety, but integral to the experience itself, a somatic language through which the body communicates danger more eloquently than words. The seatbelt, once a symbol of protection, feels constricting. The car's shell, previously a refuge, transforms into a trap. The urge to flee battles with the impossibility of flight, locking the traveler in a state of suspended action where every instinct screams for movement, yet every avenue for escape seems fatally compromised. Interpersonal dynamics also begin to fracture under the strain, not in overt confrontation, but in the subtle withdrawal of trust and solidarity. A sideways glance, a hesitant question, the way a hand lingers too long on a door handle. These gestures betray the growing sense that each person is alone in their perception, denied the reassurance of shared reality. When a companion insists, with haunted certainty, that they saw a figure on the roadside or heard a voice whispering through the vents, the impulse is not to comfort but to recoil. The night's atmosphere breeds suspicion, not only of the external world, but of each other's sanity, intentions, and loyalties. Bonds forged in daylight fray in the darkness, leaving only the echo of lost camaraderie. At the heart of this unraveling lies a cruel paradox. The more desperate the search for meaning and coherence, the more elusive they become. Attempts to rationalize the inexplicable, blaming fatigue, weather, or mechanical failure, only serve to deepen the abyss. The mind, confronted by a reality that refuses to yield to logic, flails for explanation and finds none. In this crisis, the familiar tools of navigation, reason, memory, shared experience, are rendered useless, replaced by a raw and unfiltered encounter with the unknown. What remains is the chilling certainty that something fundamental has shifted, and the rules that once governed the world no longer apply. This is the point of no return, a crossing over into territory from which there may be no safe passage back. As the night deepens, fear mutates from an external threat to an internal contagion, infecting the mind with doubts that gnaw at the edges of selfhood. The consequences of earlier choices, once so easily rationalized, now reverberate with growing intensity, each minute judgment echoing like a footfall on hollow ground. It is no longer the outside world that poses the greatest danger, but the corrosive uncertainty that seeps into thought, memory, and resolve. When confronted with an inexplicable situation, a car that won't start, a phone that flickers with impossible timestamps, or a voice that sounds achingly familiar yet utters words you cannot quite parse, the intellect falters. The mind, desperate to maintain order, devises explanations that border on the absurd, and yet these are clung to with the desperation of a drowning person who mistakes driftwood for salvation. Pushed beyond the limits of logic, moral boundaries become blurred. What once seemed unthinkable, abandoning a companion in search of help, ignoring the pleading voice on the other end of a static-laced phone call, or trespassing into the forbidden woods for a hope of rescue, now presents itself as necessity. The ordinary rules of decency and empathy waver, replaced by a primal calculus of risk and reward. Each character weighs their own survival against the cost to others, and in these quiet, excruciating moments, the mask of civility slips. Guilt, regret, and shame intermingle with relief and anger, forming a volatile brew that simmers just beneath the surface. In the stifling silence that follows each decision, the knowledge of what one is capable of doing for self-preservation becomes more terrifying than any shadow lurking outside. Moreover, the environment itself seems to conspire, presenting moral dilemmas that cannot easily be resolved. When a battered traveler stumbles from the dark woods begging for sanctuary, the instinct to help wars with the fear of contamination, of letting the unknown breach the thin membrane of safety the car provides. Similarly, when a companion's behavior shifts subtly, their eyes refusing to meet yours, their voice edged with unfamiliarity, the question arises, do you trust them, or do you act on the suspicion that something unseen has already taken hold? Every choice is a wager, the stakes raised by the knowledge that the wrong move could invite disaster or damnation. In the midst of these trials, alliances splinter and reform along unpredictable lines. A former confidant becomes a liability, their trembling hands and frantic whispers a constant reminder of how quickly rationality can dissolve. At the same time, uneasy partnerships emerge. Two strangers, united by mutual fear, share fragments of their stories in hushed tones, searching for meaning or strategy in the chaos. Yet even these alliances are riddled with doubt. Every whispered plan, every hurried glance is shadowed by the suspicion that betrayal is only a misstep away. The need for connection is as urgent as the need for safety, but the two are increasingly at odds, each path fraught with peril. Finally, the most harrowing test is not faced in an outward confrontation, but in a private reckoning. Alone, staring into the rearview mirror, the protagonist is forced to confront the version of themselves that this ordeal has revealed. The reflection is unfamiliar, hollow-eyed, lips pressed into a hard line, hands trembling with the residue of fear and guilt. The question lingers. After everything that has transpired, is it possible to return to the person they once were? Or has the darkness carved permanent fissures in the psyche, transforming them into something unrecognizable? This internal reckoning, silent and inescapable, becomes the crucible through which each survivor must pass, forever marked by the knowledge of what they have done and what they might yet become. Reflecting on this journey so far, one senses a subtle yet inexorable convergence, an undercurrent that draws disparate threads together, not in the comfort of resolution, but in the charged suspense that precedes it. The boundaries separating the self from the world, the known from the unknowable, have thinned like mist, leaving behind only the faintest delineations. The darkness outside the windows no longer belongs solely to the landscape, but has migrated inward, settling in the quiet spaces between breaths, in the tremor beneath each decision, in the way memories now cast shadows of their own. It is as though every mile traveled has been a silent negotiation with the forces that shape us: loneliness, hope, guilt, the primal urge to survive, rendering the familiar uncanny and the ordinary perilous. In this liminal state, anticipation sharpens, as if the air itself has become electrified with the promise of revelation. The passage through isolation and uncertainty has not merely tested the physical limits of endurance, but has demanded a reckoning with deeper, more elusive truths. What remains is not a simple catalog of events, but a changed perspective, a widening of the aperture through which the world is perceived. Just as headlights reveal only a sliver of the road ahead, so too does understanding illuminate only fragments, leaving the greater landscape submerged in shadow. The cumulative effect is not disorientation for its own sake, but a kind of baptism, an immersion in the raw materials of fear, trust, and the unknown, out of which some new, if uneasy, equilibrium must emerge. There is a sense now that the journey has become self-generating, its momentum sustained less by external threat than by the internal gravity of those who travel it. Each moment echoes forward, influencing the next, weaving a tapestry of consequences that cannot be unraveled by simple hindsight. The past is no longer a place to which one can return unscathed. It is instead a shifting terrain, altered by every choice and every encounter with darkness. This recursive quality, where every action ripples out in unforeseen ways, blurs the distinction between victim and participant, between witness and architect. The line between what is followed and what is fled from becomes ambiguous, a haunting ambiguity that lingers in every silence, every glance, every tremor of doubt. As the final horizon approaches, the relentless uncertainty of the road begins to feel less like a threat and more like an invitation, one that compels each traveler to interrogate what they bring with them into the dark and what they might be willing to leave behind. The external world, once a source of menace, has become a mirror, reflecting back the fragile architecture of the self. It is not only the landscape that has transformed, but the very capacity to interpret and endure it. The journey has been a crucible, and though its lessons remain obscure, their weight is undeniable, settling over every thought and gesture like the hush before a storm. In light of this, the atmosphere is heavy with possibility, the final miles, resonant with the silent expectation of what might yet be revealed. The road, no longer simply a means of passage, has become a stage upon which the deepest anxieties and longings are played out, each turn promising both danger and discovery. As we pivot towards the final reflection, the accumulated tension presses, in not with the promise of release but with the certainty that something essential has shifted, both in the world and within those who have dared to travel its haunted length. The night holds its breath, the headlights stretch forward, and somewhere just beyond the edge of vision the conclusion awaits, patient and unblinking. Night on the open road is not merely a backdrop for fear, but a crucible in which the most essential truths of the human condition are laid bare. In the hush between distant towns and beneath the indifferent sprawl of stars, something elemental emerges, a confrontation with the limits of reason, the fragility of safety, and the boundaries we draw between ourselves and the unknown. It is here, where the illusion of control slips so easily through our fingers that we are forced to acknowledge the darkness as more than mere absence of light. It is hunger, memory, and possibility woven together, pressing in at the glass and whispering that our certainties are as thin as fog. Within this darkness, the things we fear most are not always monsters at the roadside or shadows in the mirror, but the echo of our own thoughts when the world grows quiet. The night reveals how quickly trust can wither, how swiftly a laugh can dissolve into suspicion, and how easily companionship can become a source of unease. Each story, whether of a couple stranded at a nameless rest stop, friends lost between memory and menace, or a solitary driver haunted by static and silence, reminds us that the borders of reality are porous. We are, at our core, creatures of story and sensation, forever negotiating with the unknown just beyond the edge of our headlights. Yet, it is not only terror that the night brings. There is a strange, stark beauty in the way fear sharpens the senses, in how the mind seeks meaning amid chaos. The highway, with its endless horizon and shifting shadows, becomes a mirror for the self, a place where we are stripped to our rawest instincts and compelled to reckon with who we become when the rules fade and explanations fail. These moments of vulnerability, when we teeter between panic and perseverance, carry within them the seeds of transformation. Even as we are haunted by what we cannot understand, we are also propelled by a stubborn, flickering hope that we might endure, that dawn will come, that the darkness is not infinite. If there is a lesson to be gathered from these midnight journeys, it is that fear is not merely an enemy to be outpaced, but a companion with something vital to teach. It demands humility, for it exposes the limits of our knowledge and the arrogance of certainty. It demands courage to keep moving forward when every instinct urges retreat. And it demands empathy as we realize that every traveler, no matter how composed their exterior, carries their own hidden terrors, their own private confrontations with the abyss. So when the road stretches out before you, and the last tail light winks out on the horizon, consider what the darkness offers. Let it remind you that beneath the veneer of routine and comfort lies a world still wild, still unknown, and still capable of unsettling wonder. The true test is not whether you can banish the shadows, but whether you can face them and, in doing so, discover something enduring within yourself. The journey does not end when the sun rises or the car returns to familiar streets. The real trial is the willingness to look unflinchingly at what lingers on the fringes of certainty, to accept that the unknown will always ride with us, just beyond the reach of our lights. And perhaps as you move through the quiet hours and the long, empty roads of your own life, you will find a new kind of strength, not in denying the presence of darkness, but in learning to navigate by it. The true practice begins now, In every moment you choose to keep going, even when the path ahead is anything but clear.